right? Well, and so clearly there was more to it than that, right? What, you know, enough has been written about it, enough has been said about it, but what Steve Jobs saw was when he saw this, he didn't think he's making one of these things. He thought that what he's doing is going to make music a lifestyle choice, right? So that had to do with the aesthetics of the design, the connectedness of that device to a million songs that are each available at 99 cents or whatever it's available at, right? And kind of thought through the problem in a different way. You still might have called it crazy, right? But he didn't see just the whole of that donut, right? He saw that this thing was part of a broader user experience. And this time after time after time, you can see businesses where on the face of it is not doing that much different, but which make the difference between lack of success and success. I'll give you an example. A few years ago, I moved houses. Okay, we were living in the San Francisco area, and I moved houses approximately 2 miles within the same city from one house to another house. And we were looking at moving companies that would move our furniture and take us from, move all our furniture to the new house. And we got quotes from these 2 or 3 different companies. And one company said, they were half the price of everybody else. And, so that's instantly attractive to cheap-minded people like me. And I said, okay, great. What does the service look like? And they said, we looked at your house, and there's a little driveway. Our truck won't fit into the driveway. So our quote is to drop all the furniture at your front gate. Okay? So they were going to move all our furniture from one house to another house, and they were going to leave it on the road, on the sidewalk, in front of my front gate. And, I would pay 5 times as much for the convenience of having it actually moved into the house, instead of me having to kind of lug all the furniture up, right? But so when you think about the service that these people were offering, they offered a useless thing at half the price. And a small thing like adding some people to move it into the house would complete the service and maybe worth 3 times or 4 times what they quoted me. Adding content to the iPod alters dramatically the experience, right? So the way to think about ideas is not just what does this one thing do, right? It's what's the broader context of the user experience. And I think there's a lot of examples of kind of the muscles you need to develop when you're looking at ideas to kind of step back and say, what behavior is it altering? What is the full end-to-end user experience in Gap? When you start a business, there's lots of constraints. You don't have money. You need to get money to support your family. Your principal idea requires you to involve 2 or 3 people in the company that are not going to come and work for you, right? So there are all sorts of constraints in this. And one of the things that as an entrepreneur you learn to do, and I had a discussion before this talk with a group of IIT, ex-IIT entrepreneurs. Constraints are a fantastic thing. They are the thing that causes what you build to be really interesting. Okay? So this is a house in the US. What is this thing on the left? Yeah. So this is this house, right? They had a plot of land and built this house around this rock that then went into, all the big architectural magazines. And what made it interesting? Was the rock, right? And quite often, the constraints that you face right, results in a vastly superior idea than an unconstrained approach. I know enough people who, during the boom days, raised lots and lots of money to fund their startups. And because they had lots and lots of money, they would be forced to spend lots and lots of money, and they wouldn't see that their product was not working because their survival didn't depend on it. But if you have very little money, you are very sure that in the next 6 months or the next 12 months, this thing had better start making money, otherwise, I can't sustain it for very long. And the moment you think that way, you have a much more creative process in actually getting to success, right? So kind of the idea of constraints is an important thing to embrace. Okay? And it's not always a problem. In my company that I started prior to Zyme, we had a extremely knowledgeable, thoughtful, colorful board member. And he would ask me, whenever he would have these different ways of causing my great ideas to kind of appropriately get deflated. And one of the things he said to me, which I just love because it just speaks to me all the time, is that he would say, he said to me once, and I'll never forget this, he said, "Chandran, are you trying to sell maternity clothes to just married couples?" And I said, what does that mean? So here's a couple that's just gotten married, and you're in the business of making maternity clothes. And sometime in their future, they are a potential market for you, right? Sometime in the future, this is going to become the thing that the woman most wants. But when? It's certainly not 3 years before they even think about having a child. And it's not in the 8th month of her pregnancy either, because the window's passed, right? So thinking about, just because you have an idea that makes sense, and just because you can identify people who might be possible consumers of it, doesn't mean it makes any sense. In the late 1980s, 1987 to 1990, I attempted to get a software business off the ground in India. And the concept was really simple. India has low-cost, amazing talent, technical talent, and there's lots of software needs in the US. And I should build a software company that has a team of people in India doing business with lots of people in the US. Is that a strange concept to you today? Right? It's pervasive. It's everywhere, right? It's the basis of this whole IT boom in India. But in 1987, it was the dumbest idea. And I would go talk to companies in the US, and they would say, which city in India? And you'd say Bangalore, and they'd say, where's that? Is it in the north? So it was a very different market, okay? And I was attempting to sell maternity clothes to teenagers where marriage wasn't even in their future for the next 10 years. And, figuring out that you got it wrong, or that you got the timing wrong, or that, it's a really important part of the journey, right, is to ask yourself these sorts of questions. So when you kind of de-risk an opportunity, these are the sorts of questions you need to be asking yourself. What is this? What is it? Plans for house plans, right? Does it look generally like a house plan that you might like? Yeah, it's got a 2-car garage and it's got a living room and a dining room and stuff like that. So if I moved on this house plan the kitchen to where the master suite was and moved the master suite next to the garage, would that make sense to you? So when you come in from the garage, you come right into the master bedroom? Wouldn't make a lot of sense. If I put the 3 bathrooms clustered around the kitchen, would that make sense to you? Probably not, right? So the reason you're shaking your head and saying probably not is that you have a mental model for what a valid blueprint of a house looks like. If you didn't have a prior established mental model for what a valid blueprint of a house should look like, you wouldn't be able to say whether something made sense or not. So if someone told you, can you go on this plot of land and just build a bathroom in the middle of this plot of land, and you're an architect, would you do it? You'd say, well, what is it connected to, right? And this formation of a blueprint is a really important thing. When I said, how many of you have heard of this 13-ball problem? You all have heard some kind of version of that problem, so you know what class of problem it is. You probably know that there's some kind of combination of weighings and how to eliminate it. So you've developed some mental model around it. Okay? So when you're looking at a business, you need to have some concept of a blueprint. Okay? You need to have some concept of can you sell that sort of thing to that sort of person at these kinds of price points? It's a blueprint. So that when you see something that kind of violates that, you should be able to recognize it, right? I mean, that's the goal. So what you don't get taught, right, in school and college and then in your workplace is how to form these mental blueprints faster and faster. And so what I think I'm telling you is that when you look at the 4 markers that don't work, form the complete picture. When you look at what's the name of this e-commerce service here in the thing that looks like Amazon.com? Flipkart. When you look at Flipkart, you know, at one level you can say, yeah, it's just an e-commerce site. But think about what pieces have they assembled together? What is the value of that home delivery and cash on delivery part of that entire model? And unless you think end to end about it and you start forming blueprints in your mind, you won't recognize an invalid blueprint when it's shown to you. It's very simple. If you had never seen a home blueprint before and I gave you a drawing with a kitchen connected to 2 bathrooms and leading from the bathrooms was something in the garage, you know, it would, you know, you wouldn't have a frame of reference to judge whether it made sense or didn't make sense. Okay, so at the end of all of this, okay, and it's ultimately about how do you develop these instincts, how do you develop these muscle groups quickly enough, okay? And it's not by smoking cigars and betting, but this is a game of poker, right, the way it used to be played. I'm a huge fan of poker, and there's a separate conversation about that because I think poker actually represents a really interesting life mix of skills, luck. So in this style of playing poker, you know, these friends would get together once a month, 20 hands of poker in a night. So over the course of a year, you know, 240 hands of poker would get played, and over 5 years, a little more than 1,000 hands.